Is it impossible to work with millennials or Gen Z nowadays? Or do boomers all just like to complain about the newest generation to feel cool?
Metro boom and make it boom.
South Park says it is, and they're not wrong at its core. This is what Season 26, Episode 5, Dick and Boss is all about. Matt and Trey have tackled the issues surrounding today's jobs market from many angles, and a lot of their lampooning was spot on. We're going through the episode and answering all the big questions, like, are mental health days a real thing? How bad is the current job market actually? And finally, is the newest generation of workers just entitled and lazy, or do they actually have valid concerns?
Cream shop.
That is Butters, a 10-year-old boy who got a job working at an ice cream shop. Something he can do because of the great resignation labor shortage, where businesses are now struggling to find people so they can take whatever they can get, even if that means hiring a kid, with parents' permission, of course.
That is messed up.
According to Cartman. But not because Butters is too young for a job, it's because Butters has a job and Eric does not.
I want a job.
To which Kyle rightfully points out.
You wouldn't last 4 hours on a job, fat ass.
Cartman is probably an employer's worst nightmare, which we'll have to see later. First, he checks Kyle's privilege and points out that it's easy for him to say, as he lives in a nice house and Eric is still living in a hot dog.
It's not fair that some people in our country are given the opportunity for employment while others aren't.
Cartman goes home, pointing out to his mom that their house is not a place to raise a child, and he is the man of the house, and needs to be the one making money. And there's only one solution.
You have to let me go find a job, Mom.
Eric's mom also agrees with Kyle that he wouldn't last 4 hours at a job, and after being called the Jew by Eric, she caves in and lets him have a job so he can get a healthy reality check. To which he then shows up at Butters' workplace.
Hey, Butters, I'm here for my job.
Much to Butters' surprise. You see, Cartman is not here because he actually wants a job. He just wants money, does not want to work. Just like the Gen Z, according to South Park, and employers across various industries. So what's wrong with hiring Gen Z? A lot. First, let's get to one of the most obvious ones, salary. With the current inflation and cost of living, which have increased to absurd levels in some places, Gen Z wants to be paid a livable wage. Most employers like money, however. They don't like paying more than minimum wage, especially not for a candidate that has unrealistic salary expectations and doesn't have the optimal qualifications for the job, which is also a problem. From an employer's point of view, this type of candidate is more likely to hop on a new opportunity given it pays more than their current job. An employer would prefer employees that will stay there for the long run and are worth investing time and money into. Next to that, companies have changed massively over the years. The school system remains relatively the same, meaning there is a mismatch between skills. Gen Z is also disproportionately equipped with digital skills and not enough with hands-on skills. It's why many practical workers earn more in their field than these highly educated thinkers do, simply because they're capable of doing something with their hands instead of bogus creative work. Then there is diversity and inclusion. Let me tell you, whenever a blue-haired woman walks into a job interview, you know HR is having a heart attack. Employers just want someone that best fits the position. They don't want a greasy, overweight neckbeard sitting at the reception desk to be the first impression of their company. They want a cute, sympathetic hottie with big boobs.
Some of us like it small. That's fine. Understandable. But I like it big.
Even if the greasy neckbeard would have better qualifications, they could pick the cute hottie simply because it's within the best interests of the company. It's not that employers are against diversity or inclusion, but everything that comes with it after that. It's like a ticking time bomb. It starts small with ignoring the dress code because they want to express themselves and getting Greg fired because he misspelled ginger in the group chat, but quickly turns to striking in the lunchroom because Harry was eating meat and they insist the workplace should become vegan and gluten-free from now on. Employers don't want to dedicate resources to it as it's not earning them money. That's why they'd rather avoid these employees. But there's more priorities millennials and Gen Z have. It even gets worse, as we'll see in South Park.
Butters, can you vouch for him? Is he trustworthy and...
After hesitating for a bit, Butters vouches for Eric and Cartman gets his first job. Butters starts training him.
Alright, Eric, so there's 3 types of ice cream. Waffle cone, sugar cone, and cups.
And Eric demonstrates the work ethic of his generation by asking just the right questions.
And when do we get to have breaks?
From this moment onward, it is obvious Eric does not want to work.
Okay, Eric, can you scoop out some coconut almond fudge? Why?
Now, Eric is not winning any Employee of the Month awards, but the work environment will soon change because of Butters' attitude.
'Cause it's your job, Eric. Whoa, Butters. Let's not make this a toxic work environment, okay?
After being asked to do the very bare minimum, Eric, a true Gen Zer, calls the environment toxic. So what is a toxic work environment? Initially, the term toxic environment was literal, until 1989 when some boomers started complaining using the term as a metaphor. It defined a toxic workplace as those featuring conflict among roles, obscure goals and values, aggressive communication, and scenarios in which staff are used like material resources. It slowly became ubiquitous, but really took off with the #MeToo movement. Now, toxic work environments have probably existed all throughout history. They came in different shapes and sizes, but with all the emancipation going on in the last century, morals changed and so did work environments, leading to new standards. According to a survey, about 88% of the 19 to 34-year-olds have experienced a toxic work environment. 90% of the 35 to 44-year-olds have experienced it, but only 79% of 45-plus-year-olds have experienced it. That's about a 20% difference for people that have worked longer in their lives, only to have experienced it less. Does that prove that Gen Z and millennials are way more easily agitated than boomers? Not necessarily, as a lot of other factors play a role, like how boomers value loyalty more to an employer, meaning they could have experienced less work environments. It could also be that boomers are more tolerant to toxic work environments. Whatever party you ask will just blame it on the other. I personally think there's some truth to both. Apart from that, there is something else that has been made up by Gen Z and millennials that didn't impact boomers back in the day, which we see happening in South Park.
Eric, you can't just sit there at a table.
Eric decided he needs to take a small break from work, and he can, because it's Monday. So why don't young people like to work on Monday? Well...
So haven't you heard of Bare Minimum Mondays? It's a thing that young people have created because we care about our mental health.
Are mental health days really a thing? Well, it is according to the internet. I couldn't find any laws about it. It usually depends on the PTO policies, which are vastly different from one company to another. Now, I'm not saying these mental health days are bad. It's pretty good that young people show that they care about their own personal well-being. As mental health problems have become an increased problem over the last years, it affects about 1 in 5 people worldwide. So chances are you could have experienced something yourself as well. A psychopathology study by the American Psychological Association reveals that over the last few decades, there has been an increase in demand for care. Economic stressors, the global pandemic, and population growth are all considered contributing factors for the increase in mental health disorders. But Eric does not care about any of those studies. He's abusing the system and morals society has implemented to deal with the global mental health pandemic, which reminds me of the time I was working my first job in a small convenience store. We were only allowed a 15-minute break on our 4-hour shifts, which was very strictly enforced. Unless you were smoking. People that went for a cigarette were given a chance to do so outside of the breaks. It was massively unfair to the others who weren't allowed to take breaks merely because they didn't smoke. You can probably guess what started happening after that, as it was a system that got abused pretty easily. Eric loves that. It's another system he can abuse, much like another system that has become the norm at some companies since 2019. Eric continues being a terrible employee and doesn't return to work from his break. At this point, a kid delivers a laptop to Butters. To no one's surprise, it's Eric.
Hey, Butters.
He's working from home, even though he's working at an ice cream shop, much to the surprise of the manager as well. Not even touching on the subject of Eric laying on the couch with a bag of crisps, well, he's not feeling well. After the pandemic, a lot of people wanted to work from home, and rightfully so. I've always loved working from home, even if it's just 1 or 2 days a week. It allows me to do my laundry, vacuum the living room, run some errands, and maybe go to the gym outside of those busy hours. All while still being paid for sometimes moving my mouse so I appear online to other coworkers. It's even better to start a meeting with just yourself so that you appear to be in a meeting, where no one else will bother you and won't be surprised if you don't reply the whole day. You were in a meeting after all. There is another side to this though. Working from home also incentivizes me to be more productive to prove to my boss that I'm able to work without his direct supervision. There were also less distractions as I wasn't chatting up my coworkers anymore. If I do the same, or even more, work, when working from home and do it even quicker, why would it be a problem? It all boils down to oversight and control over employees' work and when they are not physically present in the office. They just love micromanaging. Does that mean employees working from home are less productive? Not necessarily. There are many studies claiming that they are more productive. There are also studies claiming it's about 10 to 20% less productive. We will never know if companies have paid to manipulate these studies to enforce their own rules, so you can decide for yourself. Besides that, there's also massive amounts of money involved. Companies either own their office buildings or they have a long-term lease which they can't break. If you have a 10-year lease on a building, you still have to pay rent every single month even if the office is empty. If you break the lease, you still have to pay out of the rest of your contract. So companies are forcing employees back to the office to make sure they still get some value for the money they're spending on rent or building maintenance. Then there are also government subsidies. Companies like Amazon gets tax breaks from state and city governments to build offices in a city. State and city governments expect those offices to be filled with people who are spending their money in the local coffee shops, restaurants, etc. If those people aren't doing that because they're working from home, the tax breaks get withdrawn and companies are forced to pay millions of dollars. So they force employees back to the office to retain their tax breaks and avoid any penalty clauses in their contracts with city governments. Just like Cartman is forced back to work after twisting both mental health days and working from home privileges into a running joke, or, well, Cartman being his usual self is just complaining again.
You know what's total bullcrap, Butters? It's how much money the owner of this place is making while we're out here busting our asses.
Despite Cartman not doing a minute of work and being lazy on his boss's dime, he leaves Butters to do all the work and reaches his breaking point. Cartman decides he wants to become an entrepreneur and wouldn't want to be working for a boss anymore, which is also peak Gen Z behavior, and there's several reasons for it. Many Gen Zers and younger audiences are looking towards entrepreneurial opportunities as a more attractive career path. And I'm not just talking about the OnlyFans models who are in it for the money. This generation values independence and flexibility in their work life, often prioritizing work-life balance and the ability to control their own schedules so they can hop on GTA 6 once it finally releases in 2040. A further motivation for young entrepreneurs is the desire to make a positive impact in their community, or perhaps not even just a positive impact on their community, but to flex on their Instagrams. Think about it. We're surrounded by luxury cars, mansions, and lavish lifestyles on Instagram. It's almost like propaganda that is being pushed in front of everyone's eyes. It's creating a desire to live such a lifestyle with many influencers claiming they make millions being an entrepreneur who are taken as inspiration. The biggest facade is, most are just fake. They're pretending to be rich so you buy their course, which will actually make them rich. Besides that, 72% of Gen Zers believe times have been economically tougher for them than for earlier generations, making them believe they need to be entrepreneurial to earn more to cover basic expenses like housing, groceries, and Fortnite game passes. There are claims that Gen Z is actually the first generation in about 70 years to be worse off than the previous one, but then again it's highly politicized and sufficiently subjective that it's really easy to make the data fit nearly any argument you want to make. Let me know what you guys think by sharing your thoughts in the comments below. With his newfound entrepreneurial drive, Eric turns to one of his most trusted friends to start a business together.
Kenny, you're not gonna believe this, but I just quit my job.
You had a go?
He explains to Kenny he got fed up with working his fingers to the bone for some lazy piece of bleep owner and came to the genius idea of opening a restaurant with Kenny. And he's found just the location. That, of course, is Butters. It takes a little bit of convincing, but after a little while, Butters is on board as an investor.
And I know exactly what we should name it.
Now we all know where this is going.
And the new name has just been announced. Dick and Balls Hot Dogs is sure.
To be fair, this would probably be a hit on TikTok and Instagram as well, if someone opened a hot dog stand with that name. It's a hit with Kenny and Eric as well.
He said it! We got him to say Dick and Balls!
And it doesn't just stop there. Eric is a marketing genius, and his hot dogs have a nice signature smiley face below them, accompanied by a fitting slogan.
Let Dick and Balls put a smile on your buns.
Now, like a true investor, Butters comes in angry about the name, noticing Cartman and Kenny are just playing around and spending his investor money on some expensive dinners and shirts that say business owner. Much like those influencers I talked about earlier who would rather talk about being a business owner than actually doing any work. But unlike those course sellers, Dick and Balls actually has some potential to it. The unnecessary renovations start happening around Cartman's house, and everything seems to be going according to plan. Meanwhile, Butters goes home and gets scolded by his parents for not having any money in his bank account anymore. There could only be one reason for this, according to his dad. Feeling betrayed, Butters calls Cartman to see what's up. Eric is of course enjoying the whole new playground his house has become, still not moving a finger. Initially, Cartman believes reopening the Dick and Boss restaurant is going to be an easy task. He feels confident that his entrepreneurial spirit will lead to success, even promising Butters that everything will work out. Butters, skeptical and fed up, challenges Cartman to just get it over with, pushing him to open the business and see what happens. Cartman agrees and will start hiring, starting tomorrow. Only to find out he's about to get a taste of his own medicine.
What the hell is going on? Why is nobody showing up?
The lack of candidates leads Cartman to confront a teenager passing by, asking if he wants to work for minimum wage, which he doesn't. Cue the boomer rant.
That's because your generation is lazy! You got all comfy during the pandemic, nobody knows how to work anymore!
So is the newest generation actually that lazy and entitled? Millennials and Gen Z can be very lazy, and lots of them are the employees who slack off or make TikToks in the bathroom during their breaks. But it's definitely not all of them, as we see with the current rise of the hustle culture where relentless work and productivity is glorified. We all like to bash on generations that aren't our own. Millennials laugh at boomers for their leather phone cases that double as wallets. Boomers say millennials are whiny wokey-cokies who spend all their money on avocado toast so now they can't buy houses. And of course, millennials and boomers accuse Gen Z of being entitled and lazy. The thing about generational stereotyping is that it comes from somewhere, and often, parts of it are true. Millennials, for example, can't afford to buy houses and do indeed like avocado toast. But are those things related? It's true that Gen Z talk more about boundaries and stick to those boundaries harder than the generation before them. And it's true that Gen Z doesn't want to do certain types of work. Gen Z is just a product of a society that's evolved far quicker than any point in history. That means things that motivate them are very different from what motivated previous generations. Boomers and Gen Xers often emphasize loyalty and long hours, while millennials and Gen Zers are likely to challenge the status quo, seeking flexibility and purpose in their careers. Thus, Gen Z is lazy and boomers are old-fashioned. Luckily, boomers are also keen to adapt in the case of South Park. As Cartman keeps hiring, Daryl shows up. Eric offers Daryl the position he's looking for. Daryl immediately asks if he can work from home and that he will need mental health days, sparking outrage by Eric.
Where do people get this stuff? Alright, fine, never mind, we don't want to hire you.
Now that Eric is on the opposite side, he's suddenly quick to change his opinion. He would make a great politician. I mean, he tries to get another set of employees, but the same thing keeps happening, leading to his eventual downfall.
It's impossible to open any kind of business these days when this generation doesn't know how to work.
Meanwhile, poor Butters finds himself working to the bone to make the money that Cartman claims he needs. When he finds out Cartman took all of his money and used it to turn the hot dog stand into the dream home he wants, he goes ballistic.
Dang it!
Using all the skills he's learned, Butters single-handedly runs Dick and Boss and does an excellent job doing so. Before long, enough customers arrive for him to make back all the money Cartman blew and then some. Turns out, much like with all the problems of today's society, all you need is an individual that actually does something, instead of getting a useless degree or overthinking if they want their eggs scrambled or hard-boiled.